the emotional self and the causes of disease. We have seen that the body, which we call physical, is only a part of man's organism. There is around and within each one of us an area of vibration which is definitely associated with the body, which transmits and receives influences not by physical contact alone, but also by the more subtle agency of thought and feeling. The greater body has form because it is definite enough to occupy space, and yet the form is continuously changing and altering. The whole organism, which includes this, is conscious, that is, it has intelligence, is open to the impressions which are constantly being made upon it, and faithfully reports them to the self. At the same time, we must remember that this consciousness is the impersonal activity of mind. It does not think as I, the ego, think. It does not have ideas. It takes them. It takes them from me, or it takes them from without, unless I tell it not to. It is thus a great blessing or a great curse to man that he has this neutral field of consciousness. If he controls the images that it receives, if he consciously directs his life, if he prohibits the invasion of false thoughts and suggestions, he has reason to be grateful for the neutral activity of mind, for it is his silent partner, his willing worker who takes his orders and continues to build the body and to care for the whole organism without any great amount of thought on the part of the conscious self. If, on the other hand, you and I are ignorant or careless of the influences which surround and affect us, we are continuously open to the invasion of disease, unhappiness, poverty, and all the brood of negative thought devils. For the neutral consciousness takes the impression that is given to it and passes it on as the working model of the cell life, and each cell takes the architect's plans and begins to build accordingly. This is the way in which contagious diseases get their innings. The individual is not always consciously thinking of or fearing the disease, but his consciousness is open to the inroads of any thought that may come blowing along on the winds of fate. For him who lives by conscious choices, life is therefore destiny. For him who lives by chance, life is fate. All persons vary in the degree with which the creative or feeling consciousness is affected by ideas and influences. Some people are very sensitive and are open to the slightest impression. To be sensitive is simply to leave the field of the feeling consciousness unguarded and to allow others to sow the fatal seeds of their thoughts and opinions upon the rich soil within. Then we experience it as pain, or, as we often say, my feelings are hurt. And as each emotion seeks an outlet at the weakest point, these feelings make their impression upon the flesh in all forms of disorder. Diseases in women can be largely traced to the reactions of the emotional life, from the fact that their love nature is more tender and gentle than that of men. Women allow the inharmony of things to make a deeper impression upon them. Thus even words that are not meant to contain a sting are held to the bosom like the poisonous sap until peace and love are stung to death. Sometimes I think that unintentional hurts are more cruel than those that are given in some burst of anger, because to be thoughtless along some lines is an indication that we have not cared enough to think how it will affect the other. Few men or women would think of plunging a dagger into another's flesh, and yet they use the tongue, which is a two-edged sword, and turn it within the wound. It pierces the vital atmosphere of the emotional life and makes its mark upon the creative consciousness within. Thus, both soul and body are plunged into hell. The day will come when we shall put a heavy fine upon the man or woman who predicts disaster and disease and utters croaking forecasts of coming evil, for he is cursing the race. Yet today we turn the pages of our newspapers and read of those who prognosticate the return of some dreadful scourge or some great cataclysm of nature, and then lay out the tools of their industry, ready to reap the harvest which their foul seed has caused to spring up. Direful forecasts, pratings of so-called evil times, fault-finding, pessimistic utterance, slander, gossip of a malicious character, all these are the spawn and the incubus of disease, want and misery, for they fall on the fertile and productive soil of the race consciousness, and, entering any door that swings upon unsuspecting hinges, they make their abode within the body. Here, like a serpent, they coil for the spring, like its bite they fester in the flesh. Whole peoples have been extinguished by the false gods of the national ideals and ideas, for thought is father to the act, and ideas, making their impress upon the creative mind of the individual, the race and the cosmic consciousness alike, bring forth the dread cancer that burns out the life of the nation. How invidious are the temptations of our life, when the very individual who reads this may exclaim, "Yes, that is so. See what I have suffered from the tongue and acts of others. They have brought it upon me." This is perhaps a natural thought, but a very dangerous one. For if it be true that we must accept these things, we are bound to the chariot wheel of the most vulgar thinking amongst us. We are children of choice. We are rulers of this organism by right of that divine freedom within us, which determines what thoughts and impressions shall be admitted to consciousness. The conscious self is the gatekeeper in the house of the Lord of our life, and can challenge all comers. For we must realize that the feeling life is not objective but subjective. It is that which we discern as the greater body of the individual, and is primarily controlled by his mind. While, therefore, we are to guard against unconscious control of our lives and fate from without, we are not to lose sight of the fact that we of ourselves are constantly initiating the causes which bring disease and unhappiness upon us. That intense emotions do create physical reactions with startling suddenness is shown in the case of those investigations which have been made in examining the blood of people under the stress of excitement of one kind or another. It is found that the normal secretions of the body do not take place, but in their stead, frequently, some kind of poison is distilled by the overwrought cells and glands. Fear, anger, jealousy, hate, and so on, each produce some form of substance poisonous to the system. A mother in fear or hate has been known to poison the milk of her babe. Under stress of worry, the stomach will often turn the gastric juice to acid. An extreme of the reaction of feeling upon the physical organs came to my attention in the case of a woman who lost her sight because she vehemently declared that she wished she might never see her husband's face again. She was afterwards healed through the science of mind. Love that is unrequited, or that is constantly violated in its finer instincts, has a power of reacting on the system with terrible force. A sort of stifling takes place throughout the whole body, shrinking of the nerve cells, and a kind of congestion is felt, and a soul sickness lays hold of one. When love is hurt, feeling itself seems ready to die, and the whole body and mind is plunged into a distraught condition. The heart cries out against it, and against the fate which love, more cruel than hate, has prepared for the tortured soul. Here is where the ministry of truth alone can soothe the broken heart and restore lost confidence and hope. It is a vast issue, for life is pitted against death, and faith against bitter loss. We have thus seen that what we frequently call the psychic nature opens us to the invasion of health or disease, for the same feeling life that takes the imprint and contagion of disease is also open to the contagion of good health and well-being. In our practice as healers, we shall frequently discover that the patient is not suffering from the actual presence of physical disorders, as in the case of cancer, tuberculosis, anemia, and so on, but is suffering from what is as yet only the psychic counterpart. In other words, the feeling life is distressed, and the organ that is affected is only vibrating to the inharmony of the consciousness resident within it. In such cases, we can often effect an immediate cure through the removal of the thought cause. This would be an instantaneous cure. Where the physical organ has become diseased or deformed, a slower reaction often occurs. This, however, is not so much due to the difficulty of changing the physical tissues as in changing the thought or consciousness of the sufferer. The cell life is stamped with the image of disease, and we must restore the perfect concept before the physical change takes place. I have known of instantaneous cures taking place so rapidly that growths have slipped away bodily, or swellings have been reduced so quickly as to cause a great itching and momentary heat. In such case, the emotional life or consciousness was immediately affected. This frequently happens with children especially, because they take the word of the healer on perfect trust, and as faith is everything, verily it has its own reward. The close relation between mind and body is continually being illustrated. Take the case of men who through shell shock or fear have lost sight and hearing. In some instances, these same men have had sight and hearing restored by a counter-fear. For example, when the hospital ship which was bringing them home was sunk, the need for sight or hearing in order to protect them from the new peril was so great as to stimulate the creative activity so that they were able once more to use their eyes and ears. Fear acts in such cases as a strong image of desire. The impact of thought is insistent, and the needed power of the organ is instantaneously restored. Disease is simply the image of wrong thinking sustained in consciousness until the deformed creation takes place. Health is the right image acted upon in the same way. Spirit is all from one end of the scale to the other, and faith and persistency will heal. All disease is mental, since all is mind, and organic troubles are simply the deeper-seated habit of wrong concepts. Disease and health are alike mental habits. It thus becomes clear to us that the emotional or creative life is profoundly affected by our thought and, being entirely neutral, goes on functioning in the flesh according to the dominant idea. It is just as true for health and happiness as it is for the reverse. And as the majority of men think healthful and hopeful thoughts, we find more well people than sick ones, although almost every one at some time or another opens himself to the invasion of wrong thinking. Whatever most fills the mind will most govern the destiny, whether it be high or low, good or bad. We make our way through the world, we build our hell or heaven We crawl or soar, we sink or swim by the choice of the thoughts that daily swarm in the throne room of the mind. There within sits the Christ Self, master of life and happiness. He alone passes final decree. His word is law. The feeling life, the creative intelligence within, is his servant, doing whatsoever his will shall desire. Infinite in resources, because heirs of the ages and one with the eternal, possessing powers transcendent and able to choose what he will have. Man passes through the world, selecting what pathway of destiny he shall follow, what mountains he shall climb, to what stars his soul shall soar, through the selection of those things that fill his mind, and thus direct his creative consciousness.